Hello, this is the second video of the BoosterLink triplet. In the first video we just looked at the very basic operation and the simple ways of setting it up and using it. In the last video we looked at some practical applications, and in this video I'm just going to show some of the stuff under the hood, some little more advanced application. Other things you might need to know that might be helpful at other times, and it'll give a better understanding of how it works as well. Now, so I've set up a very simple little scene here with a joystick kind of object and a block here. I've just put a bit of shape on the block so we can see it moving around a little bit easier as it works on the screen. So I want to set up, say we'll move this joystick from left to right. The car will move along the X channel. Okay, so the first thing to do is, well, I don't need the heading or bank channels in these, so I'll lock them off. I'll change that to an FK node as well, just so I can simply click and drag on it, as opposed to having to click and drag on the value, or activate the node first and then click and drag on the value. Of course, we need to set limits on that value as well. At the moment, when I right click on it and set a limit, that defaults to the usual LightWave minus 180 limit. We're going to reset that limit, which will make it go back down to 0, 0. And then if I hold Control and drag on the limit, as you've seen in the first video, that will set the minimum at, let's say, minus 45. And still holding Control and dragging the opposite direction, I go to 45. And that's the maximum. Where I let go, that's the maximum. So I've let go of Control now and stopped dragging, and that's the minimum and maximum rotations. Just remember when you do that you have to reset the limit first in order to get it down to 0. Otherwise it's on the 360 limits, the minus 180, 180, and then you won't see anything happening. Okay, so I've set limits on that. That means now it's ready for linking from the driven object. I'm going to move this on the x-axis, so let's just click on right-click on the x and add a link. Let's come back over here. We want it to be on the pitch channel, so I'm going to right-click on the link and change channel to pitch. And as I click and drag on this, yeah, so you can see it's moved. At the minimum, I'm going to push that down a bit, and I go to maximum. That's fine. Okay, so that's the basic setup. We went through all that yesterday anyway. Now we'll look at something just a little bit more, put something a little bit more interesting on that. Let's say we want this to waver in and out as it travels along that line. We can do that very easily again. We'll work off just make sure that's the previously selected item before I add a link. I'll add a link on the Z channel here. And that's hopped over because it's gone to the joystick's Z channel, so all I need to do is send that back to its limited channel, which is the pitch channel. So change channel, go to pitch, and let's set some limits. At minimum, yeah, that's fine, and at maximum, that's fine. Halfway, reset value to get it back to 0. Halfway, I don't want it all the way over there. Let's see how that looks. Now we've got a bit of a wobble. Quite a bit on there. Well, the point of this is, anyway, I can edit this in the graph editor. I can edit the path of that block in the graph editor, and I get very, very close and easy control over it. So I'm going to right click on, or click on the object and right click on the link and go to edit graph. That opens up our graph editor, and you can see here the channel. It's a shame I chose blue. That's got a whole lot of keys in there. Let's just delete them first. I just show that you can, if I delete them now, it's come back to a straight motion. And if I add some keys, See, I got the wobble again. So what's going on here? This is actually the part of IK Booster that I myself had trouble coming to terms with. In the traditional graph editor, for those of you who are used to working with it, along the bottom of the readout here is a timeline that would always, for me, that would always represent minus 20 frames, 40, 60, frame 80, frame 100, and so on. When we're editing the IK Booster link, when you right click on the link and go to edit graph, actually I'll choose that channel because it's easier to see, it's in red. Should be easier to see on the screen. When we edit there, we can see there's a key at 0, what we normally think of frame 0, and there's a key at 100. And you've seen me at the scene, you know I didn't set up a key on frame 100. So what's going on here? Well, what it is that the value here at frame 0 represents the minimum limit. The minimum limit that I set on that joystick. And the value here at 100 represents the maximum for the Z channel on this. So whatever the minimum is and maximum on the joystick is, that's represented by 0 and 100 on this guy over here. And if I hover over that there, you can see the value is 65.314. That's the Z position of that block. That's the Z value of that block. And down here, minus 55.72. That's the Z value of that block again. So, or the X value, sorry, when it was down there. And you can see as I drag those, it's editing that graph. So the key to understanding this part here is values are as normal. They're up on the left hand side and they represent the values of the driven object. But on the horizontal axis of the graph here, this does not represent time. It does not represent the frame number. It represents from 0 being the minimum to 100 being the maximum of the limits that you set. Now my limits here were 45 and minus 45. If I change those limits to minus 180 to 180, that makes no difference to the minimum maximum. It's still 0 still represents minimum, 100 represents maximum, and the animation still stays the same. It just means I have to rotate that joystick around a lot more to go from 0 to 100, or to go from down there to over there. As I said, that's the basics of the graph editor and how it works. But if you don't feel too confident that you've understood that all so far, don't worry about it. Well, first of all, it's not always going to be needed. It's only needed for advanced situations. But secondly, it will come to you with more and more examples, and that I'll be making examples of use in the third video. So there's only one last part for this under the hood look at BoosterLink, and that's the motion modifier plug-in panel. And you find that again from the graph editor. If I right click on any of these links here and edit graph, in the graph editor, as we've seen already, we have our values from 0 to 0, which represents the values of the driven times the minimum and maximum length. So the channel I'm looking at here is booster 2 layer 2 is this block over here. Position X is the X channel, and you can see on the in the channel bin with this channel selected, you can see a little dot beside it, and that represents a plugin. There's a modifier plugin working on that channel, and also, as you can see here, you can see this fainter red line. That tells you the same thing as well. There's a modifier plugin on that, and to see what the modifier plugin is, you go to the modifiers tab here. Sometimes this will be hidden on your graph editor. You go to the modifiers tab and you click on modifiers, and you can see in here under modifiers there's one turned on that's called BoosterLink. This is what's doing the work of the BoosterLink. So if we double click on that, or go to edit properties, double click, we can get a panel for BoosterLink. Just minimize this graph editor here because it runs out of space. And there's a few options here in BoosterLink. And go through them. Reference item, you can change the item that the link is being made to. The reference channel, you can change that. Of course, we can do all of these on the screen as well without going into BoosterLink. Change item, change channel. Change shift frames is you can have the action happen a few frames before it's linked or a few frames after it's linked. And again, you can do that on the screen as well. If I right click on the link and change shift, see shift comes up here, and if I drag on that, I can change that value as well. And so those three are obvious, and we can do them on the screen. I don't like using the BoosterLink plugin because this was really the source of all my confusion. What the source value represented and what this change value button did, it wasn't clicking with me. It just wasn't coming in there at all. I since figured it out with the help of Dodgy on the New Tech forum, and with the usual experimenting and playing around. So I'll quickly explain what this does here. This 50% here represents 50% between minimum and maximum limits. So that's 50% of the limit. Change value simply adds a key there at 50% and allows you to change it. So long as you know that the 0 is not frames and it's a minimum limit and 100 is not frames, maximum limit, this becomes pretty obvious what it does. There I am at 25% and I've added a key and changed the value. Now, the reason I say I don't like the BoosterLink panel is because you don't need it. There's no reason why you can't just add points in here as you normally would and edit them in the graph editor as is normal. There's no need to use that panel to do it. It's not a help, I don't believe. I'll change those to a spline, and if I go to move mode, hit F1, I can change the tension of those. You can see keys actually being created on the timeline here. Remember, they're nothing to do with the timeline. As soon as I get rid of the links off my interface here, if I click on this fella, those keys are gone. They're not really keys, they're not really there. So now you can see those actions affecting that. So that's the last part. Just recap on what I've gone through there. The graph editor, we can use the graph editor to change the motion of any of those links. Instead of having it going from A to B, we can have it go via C, D, E, F, and G, rather than going directly from A to B in a straight line. That's the beauty of BoosterLink, is that we can do that. The other thing is the plugin panel for BoosterLink. There is one time actually when it is necessary, and I've forgotten about this. If you want to link to the scale of a channel, the scale channels of an object, as you can see here under options, we only have move and rotate nodes. So we can only rotate items or move them with IK Boost through the interface. But if we wanted to do a booster link from a scale channel, we haven't got the option there. So what you do is you open up the graph editor, go to one of your scale channels, under the modifiers tab, add a modifier, choose booster link, and then you can set that up as normal, like that. That's when you will need to use that plugin panel. But I'll be going through a practical example of that in video 3. And the last thing I want to do is I want to point out again, I've changed the scale of that now. I'll have to undo that. I removed that plugin and it's back to normal. And the last thing I want to do here is once again point out that all this animation and motion that we've programmed in here has nothing to do with the timeline. Just delete that key there. As I scrub the timeline, nothing is happening. But as I move this, our animation and motion happens. Again, if I go to frame 60 now, or if I go to frame 0 and drag it back this way. Then go to frame 60. Auto key is on, by the way. And drag over here. Now the animation happens over time. As I scrub, the animation is happening. And the beauty of all that is that now I can animate. I have extra control. I'm multiplying my animation on top of each other, my time control on top of each other. So I've got time control of an animation rather than time being the animation, which is similar to editing the velocity of a motion. This gives us ultra power again. I go into the graph editor. I go into that object. If I hit Shift G in the graph editor, that'll get the layout selected object. And if I go into the rotation channel, you can see those keys that I've added. I'll just scale that view a little bit so we can see those. Select those keys, change them to TCB Sublime. Change the tension to 1, and that's an ultra smooth animation. So instead of again having linear A to B controls on the motions of this item, and instead of having linear A to B control on the motion of this item, like this, we have full curve control over the speed of that motion and the amount of motion that happens to it. So that'll do it. That'll wrap it up for this video, and then we'll go through some practical examples in video 3.